and this is such a great point. This was the message from the White House. This is Barack Obama. Barack Obama didn't want the public option. So all this like, I can't believe, why are you attacking them? We need them for a majority. It's better them than a Republican. It turned out that I was all wrong. Do you think this country is naturally narrowly divided? Like, come on.
Mike. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. But your name wanna start changing your ways. Change.
All right, chat. We have a new second thought video that I wanted to watch called Why Democrats Never Get Anything Done. This should be fun. We love our second thought, don't we, folks? We love second thought. Our buddies, our pals, our friends.
It's a 100% viewer-funded operation. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some great perks while you're at it, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. Hey, isn't it weird how every time Congress is about to pass some decently progressive bill, there's always one or two Democrats suddenly ready to come out of the shadows and tip the scales against it? It's not a coincidence. And as much as Biden complains about it, he actually prefers it that way. "2024 is an election year, and unfortunately for Biden, his approval rating is in the toilet. I won't go through his whole track record, but just to refresh your memory, Biden promised a $15 minimum wage. Didn't deliver. He promised to enshrine the federal right to abortion. Didn't do that either. He promised to cancel about $10,000 of student debt per person and ultimately came in way under that number. And then, of course, you have the recent stuff with the southern border where Biden's being far more xenophobic and draconian than most Republicans, even after calling Trump out for the same thing and promising to put a stop to the border wall, which he also didn't do. You get the picture, but politicians never keep their promises, so no one's really surprised.
That's not true. This is actually not true. Believe it or not, according to the social science research, politicians tend to keep their promises. If they articulate a specific promise, they typically do tend to keep those promises. Actually, the type of promises they don't keep are the nebulous bullshit that Kamala Harris is spouting right now about turning the page and unifying the country and crap like that. But if they say, I'm going to do X, they're actually much more likely to do X, which, like, duh.
Even now, as we're hearing the Biden campaign make basically the same promises because, trust me, this time is going to be totally different. They just needed more time. Now that he's on the campaign trail, Biden is mostly pinning the blame for this sort of stuff on Republicans. It's time to rally every last Democratic voter behind him, and with a solidly Republican House and a sort of blue Senate at the moment, the reason things like that border bill didn't get through was because it was blocked by a strong Republican opposition. So it makes sense that Biden is really keen on making them look like obstructionists. But that really doesn't explain all the broken promises. For about 2 years, Biden and the Democrats had all the power you can get in American politics. The presidency, the Senate, and the House. Everything swung blue in 2021. People elected Biden on a pretty tame set of progressive promises, ostensibly gave him and the Dems all the levers of power to make them happen and a good chunk of time to deliver. And instead, we got years of disappointment, watered-down proposals, and a we believe in climate change Democratic Party that's somehow still churning out alarming numbers of new fossil fuel permits. And to explain all that, we heard a very familiar excuse. Back in 2021, for example, Biden said this.
I hear all the folks on TV saying, why doesn't Biden get this done? Well, because Biden only has a majority of effectively 4 votes in the House and a tie in the Senate, with 2 members of the Senate who vote more with my Republican friends. But we're not giving up.
It's nothing we haven't heard before. When progressive bills die in the Senate, the story's always more or less the same.
More Con Modron. Thank you for the 5 tier 1s. Hell yeah. I almost forgot I was doing this for pay. Thank you so much for supporting the stream.
Liberal outlets and Twitter accounts start blasting whoever it was that flipped the last vote, whether that's a mansion or a cinema. Biden delivers a passionate, somebody really should do something about this, not me, speech. And that's either the last you ever hear about it, or 10 months later, the bill has a new name, $10 billion in extra defense spending tacked on, and hardly anything left from the original. This sort of thing has been happening for a long time, and it's not without consequence. If you've been following politics for a bit longer, you might remember guys like Joe Lieberman, who, like Manchin today, sort of made being the Democratic Party's rotating villain his whole personality. He's dead now.
Thank God.
If you don't remember him, Lieberman was famous for a few things. Being aggressively pro-Iraq war until the day he died, and back in 2009, rejecting Obama's plan to include a public option in Obamacare. The public option would have been a federal health insurance system that could compete against private insurance and drive prices down. In very simple terms, it would have made healthcare cheaper and made private insurers lose money. It's not quite abolishing private insurance the way Bernie's Medicare for All plan would have, but still, it was something. Anyway, in 2009...
So, talking about the public option for a second, here's the thing with the public option. There's only two types of public options you can have when it comes to insurance products. You either have a public option that is objectively inferior because it doesn't offer coverage that's as good as the private market and it charges more, in which case it might as well not exist. Or you offer a public option which is objectively superior, which will replace private insurance. Because the government will always be better than a private insurance company at providing insurance. Why is that? One, it has the best premium collection technology. The government can collect premiums via a form called taxes, which it has the full suite of criminal and civil law strategies to collect, number one. Number two, the government gets the lowest interest rate loans. The government can borrow money at a cheaper price than any private individual because it is the issuer of the currency. So it has a financial advantage and it has a premium collection advantage. That makes it objectively superior to all other forms of insurance. This is just math. So if you make a good, what we call a strong public option, it will destroy the private market. So that's why insurance companies oppose a public option as much as Medicare for all. Now, why would you say, you go like, well, Mike, if that's the case, why don't you advocate for a public option and just let the private market die? Well, because it would be more chaotic. If you pass Medicare for all and you intentionally phase it in so that it covers everybody at a certain date, at a certain slope, then nobody will ever have this, there won't be paperwork they have to do. There won't have to be a bunch of bullshit. There won't be gaps in coverage. There won't be, people that fall through the cracks. And the insurance industry just gets cleaned out in one foul swoop. It doesn't get to see. The thing is, there's the period of transition where the insurance companies are going to be spending trillions of fucking dollars practically. They're going to spend every spare red cent they have trying to lobby the government to get rid of the public option or weaken it so that it's worse than private offerings, so therefore useless. So you might as well just take them all out because they suck. Now, this is something that people don't seem to understand about this kind of process, is that public options are dog shit because it's a bad policy compared to just doing the right thing. Now, if you force me to, I will support a strong public option and I'll try to destroy the insurance industry using the strong public option. And then once a bunch of people get it, hopefully there's a political, breaking point or hinge point where people just want that to be for everybody and the private insurance market dies out. But that will be tremendous political warfare and bloodshed through that entire process. And because we leave the insurance industry intact, they're going to have a lot of weapons and a lot of material to fight back against that public option. Also, lower overhead costs. Yes, the government does things better. It provides social insurance cheaper than private insurance. Duh. Duh.
The Democrats had the votes in the Senate to pass the ACA with the public option provision included. Most Democratic voters and most Americans were in favor. And suddenly, right before the vote, in comes Lieberman, vocally opposing the public option, threatening a filibuster, and because he was the deciding vote, ultimately forcing the ACA to be drafted without it.
Now, this is wrong. This is actually just incorrect history. Sorry, second thought, but you're wrong. Which, this really bothers me because it's like, why would you even spin this like this? I think he's going to correct this. I think this is supposed to be, is this supposed to, I may have lost the thread. So let me just ask this question to chat. Is him saying this is the generally accepted history? Or is he saying this is what actually happened? All right, let's go ahead and listen to what he says before I get into it.
The public realized what was going on, that even if Lieberman could block a vote by being a dissident and preventing the Democrats from having the 60 votes they needed, like the Republicans under Bush, the Democrats could use reconciliation to pass the ACA with a public option with only 50 votes.
Okay, exactly.
Then, once again, out of the woodwork comes Jay Rockefeller, another Democrat-aligned senator suddenly reversing months of his own pro-public option rhetoric and refusing to vote for it because, well, the timing isn't very good. Why wasn't the timing very good? Well, because the timing allowed the Democrats to actually exercise power in a way that would have benefited their constituents. Typically, that's good. But for the Democrats, these are very bad circumstances because they force them to either find people willing to go back on their word or actually follow through on their promise. So, why does this happen? Why do we always seem to have these obstructionists within the country's major left party blocking?
Okay, by the way, and this is such a great point. This was the message from the White House. This is Barack Obama. Barack Obama didn't want the public option. Okay? That's what, he's saying Rockefeller, he's doing the rotating villain thing, but the villain was actually Obama. The villain was actually Obama. The villain was not Rockefeller or Lieberman. This is what people don't want to accept because they like Obama, but it is the facts.
Even mild center-left policies. On some level, there's an obvious answer. And like in most American politics, that answer is lobbying. Take Lieberman. Over his career, insurance companies had contributed nearly $500,000 to his campaigns. Pharmaceutical companies almost certainly played a role too, with Lieberman's wife having several jobs in lobbying firms known for being cozy with Big Pharma, and that would have benefited from Lieberman's obstruction. The same goes, obviously, for guys like Joe Manchin, who's well known for being staunchly pro-fossil fuels and killing every bill that would lessen the US's reliance on them. Between 2017 and 2022, he was the #1 recipient of oil and gas and auto industry money to the tune of...
One of our chatters, who I don't know if they want to be revealed or not, they can tell me if they do, but one of our chatters was in DC working in a congressional office during the Obamacare fight. And they were like, yeah, it was always Obama. Obama is the one who blocked the public option.
Several million dollars. And you can say the same about centrist Democrats in the House. Earlier this year, 8 House Democrats asked Biden to lift a pause on liquefied natural gas export permit approvals. According to Jacobin, 4 of them received more than $1.6 million in oil and gas donations, and the other 4 got more than $300,000 from the energy and natural resources industry. This flies in the face of a Democratic Party that is very publicly outspoken that climate change is an existential threat. But those examples are all very direct, somewhat out in the open campaign donations. If receiving money from lobbying groups while in government doesn't sound like enough of an incentive, there's always the reassurance of the revolving door. See, being despised by your party might make your seat a little less stable, might make your party more reluctant to select you for candidacy for your state, and might generally...
Yeah, you're going to get primaried out, which is exactly what happened to Kirsten Sinema. Joe Manchin didn't even run for re-election. So all this like, I can't believe, why are you attacking them? We need them for a majority. It's better them than a Republican. It turned out that I was all wrong. It turned out that actually, no, we don't need them for a majority. Actually, no, they aren't doing this to be more electable, and that centrist Democrats are just bad. But here's the thing. And the people who scream and yell at you for criticizing them, they never go and then primary centrist Democrats and support primaries of them. In fact, we're getting a downgrade in Michigan. Whether the Republican or Democrat wins, we're getting another Kirsten Sinema. Her name is Elise Slotkin. She's going to be the senator from Michigan. She's probably the most right-wing Democrat in Michigan. Michiganders, what the fuck happened? What did you do? You just got one of the better senators and you're downgrading her to probably the third worst. What did you guys do? What did you guys do?
Attract a lot of hate you might not want to endure.
Like the primary isn't over yet? It's over.
Decades. For those who don't like being public targets,
But
there's
okay,
always
I guess I'll hold out hope.
the option of bowing out and getting just a regular lobbying gig where the connections you made in Congress are incredibly valuable. And sure enough, roughly 60% of retired lawmakers land in jobs where they end up influencing federal policy for significant salaries, at least in the exiting class of 2019. That's the case for Joe Donnelly, a conservative Democrat named as a partner in 2019, his centrist friend Doug Jones, and your favorite, Joe Lieberman, who left office back in 2013. This possibility to cash out by staying cozy with corporate lobbyists matters to conservative Democrats. How do we know that? Because none other than Joe Manchin told us so back in 2021, when he opposed the For the People Act that would have slowed down this revolving door and made it harder for congresspeople to become federal influences.
Yeah, when the For the People Act was being brought up, I was legitimately excited on stream. I was like, wow, this isn't like my perfect bill, but this is like such a good bill. Public financing of elections, banned, partisan gerrymandering, all sorts of good common sense reforms. This is actual incrementalism. Holy moly, this would actually be decent. And guess what happened? They blocked it.
Manchin wrote his own version of the bill that cut that specific ethics provision and would set up him and his centrist buddies for the foreseeable future. But let's get back to Lieberman for a second, because the especially egregious cases...
You have any idea why nobody's talking about the primary? It's this thing. I don't know if you've ever heard about it before. It's called ideology. It's where corporate media ideologically is aligned with the right wing of the Democratic Party. And so corporate media buries primaries with a centrist against a more progressive candidate if they can. It's a way of making sure that the right-wing Democrat wins. That's why nobody's talking about Hill Harper. It doesn't matter if he's a TV star. It doesn't matter if he's decent on the issues. It doesn't matter if he's relatively famous. They're burying it because they want the right-winger to win.
Of this lobbying influence are probably best represented by his group, No Labels. No Labels.
Oh, by the way, chat, remember how I said that the Congressional Black Caucus is full of some of the most corrupt Democrats in Congress? The only Democrat who voted against the For the People Act is Betty Thompson. I want you to show how Democratic Betty Thompson's district is. Nice little 60-40. Nice little 20-point W. It was a 26-point W in 2020. Gerrymandered ass bitch in Mississippi. My constituents opposed the redistricting portion of the bill as well as the section on public finances. I always listen and vote in the interests of my constituents. In other words, he wanted gerrymandering so his seat would be safe, and he didn't want public financing of elections. He likes getting his Republican money. The legislation would create a 6-to-1 match for each grassroots contribution to a candidate up to $200. For example, a $200 donation to a House candidate would garner a $1,200 match of public funds for a total contribution of $1,400. The public match program will be funded by a new 4.75% surcharge on criminal and civil penalties and settlements that corporations pay to the U.S. government. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimated this week the new revenue stream would generate $3.2 billion over 10 years. The election legislation passed by a vote of 220 to 210. No Republicans joined with Democrats in approving the sweeping voter rights reform that now heads to the Senate. The legislation would enact automatic voter registration, restore voting rights to felons after they have completed their sentences, and expand early voting and absentee voting. It also prohibits voter roll purges and partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts, imposes new campaign finance rules, and requires presidential nominees to release 10 years of tax returns. It also takes aim at big dollar donors and dark money in politics by requiring additional disclosure of campaign donors and disclaimers on political advertising. This is your average Congressional Black Caucus member.
Is a nonprofit / political party started in 2010 with the
Leaderless. Senate pushes for public option without Obama's support. President Barack Obama is actively discouraging Senate Democrats in their effort to include a public health insurance option with a state opt-out clause as part of healthcare reform. In its place, say multiple Democratic sources, Obama has indicated a preference for an alternative policy favored by the insurance industry, which would see a public plan triggered into effect in the future by a failure of the industry to meet certain benchmarks. They ended up not even including the trigger. The administration retreat runs counter to the letter and the spirit of Obama's presidential campaign. The man who ran on the audacity of hope has taken a more conservative stand than Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, leaving progressives with a mix of confusion and outrage. Guys, Barack Obama, and this is one of the things that I understand, and it sucks, which is if you don't know that Barack Obama is the worst leader of the Democratic Party and probably the sole person to blame for the rise of Trump, everyone gets so mad at you when you point out that Barack Obama fucking sucks.
The purpose of bringing together centrists and moderates in the US to grab seats from progressives. Their rhetoric is predictably uninspired and mostly characterized by calling themselves representatives of the common sense majority, while throwing everybody who doesn't work with them under the extreme header, in a country with two nearly identical parties. Anyway, No Labels doesn't publicly reveal who its donors are. As a nonprofit, that's technically allowed, if a little weird. But the problem for them is that hasn't stopped journalists from figuring this stuff out. And as you probably expect, well, it's a lot of classic Republican donors who would not be disappointed at all with having a few spoilers in the ranks of those who caucus with Democrats. Louis Bacon, a regular GOP donor, gave No Labels about $1 million to elect more centrists, for example. James Murdoch, former chief executive of 21st Century Fox, the parent company of Fox News, put in at least $500,000. Nelson Peltz, a big Trump donor, put nearly $900K into the No Labels super PAC. I think you get the idea. According to Open Secrets, No Labels has something like 8 super PACs playing with several $1 million, and frankly, those 3 names barely scratch the surface. There's a lot of demand for people willing to act as spoilers to aid the Republicans, and centrists have a lot to gain from playing that role. But if you're like me, this explanation doesn't feel complete. It's not that lobbying doesn't matter. You can always find deep wells of corporate money going to these centrists and flipping their votes, but it's just not the full picture. It doesn't explain what's in it for the Democratic Party, who, by all accounts, not only let this happen, but actively play a role in keeping it going. So why doesn't just pointing to lobbying feel like enough? For starters, conservative Democrats don't always get the most campaign donations, from corporations or in general. If the only explanation I gave you for why are they like this was money, that little piece of evidence would pretty much crush my whole argument. There's other ways to make money than to be a self-interested fence-sitter, and plenty of Democrats get just as healthy a check from being regular partisans. Oftentimes, though, you'll hear that the explanation for rotating villains has something to do with the villain of the week's constituents. If some Democrats are more conservative, the conventional narrative is that they're probably just a better representative of a more conservative district or state.
Nope.
But that's
I'm so glad that he's taking on all these dumb shit arguments. This video rules.
Not what the voting records show. Take a look at Glusenkamp Perez from Washington. She's part of a group of conservative Democrats called the Blue Dog Coalition, and beyond how lame calling yourself a blue dog is, you might remember her from her time in the villain seat as a vocal opponent of student loan forgiveness. Quote,
Jesus
she was one of just 2 Democrats to vote for a proposal that would have thrown out the entirety of President Joe Biden's student debt relief plan, and would have also retroactively reinstated interest payments and reinstated some already forgiven loans. Since joining Congress in January 2023, she's voted with Republicans more than most of her Democratic colleagues, according to Slate. And especially surprising for a Democrat, that included voting for a Republican NDAA bill that restricted abortion access for those in the military and targeted DEI initiatives at the Pentagon. Now, Gluesenkamp-Perez flipped her seat from red to blue in 2022, sure. But that does not make her district especially red among House Democrats, nor can it explain these votes. Mary Peltola, a representative from Alaska, for example, ran in a state that Trump carried by 10 points last election, double his lead in Gluesenkamp-Perez's district.
She's a blue dog,
and she never
too.
voted against either that student loan bill or the NDAA anti-abortion stuff, because she didn't need to.
But she's also a blue dog, though.
So if neither constituency nor lobbying alone can explain these obstructionists, what does? The answer is the American political economic system. Its design and the power it gives corporations through a gridlocked Congress. We tend to think of congressional gridlock as the government not working. Gridlock, obstructionism, rotating villains, they all give us the impression of a government that suddenly stops and locks up its proper function.
She's not working class, guys.
And indeed,
she's literally just an elite who bought as an investment a car repair shop, which I don't even believe she fucking... Does it even actually fix any cars?
Indeed, that's the core of the Democrats' rhetoric. Democrats campaign on being bipartisan and working across the aisle because it's necessary to overcome gridlock and return government to a proper state of affairs. But that's not the case. At least not according to Sheldon Wolin. In Democracy, Inc., Wolin spells it out pretty clearly. Quote, the true significance of near gridlock is not that it paralyzes governmental action, but that it prevents majority rule. Sharp and nearly equal divisions, the stuff of gridlock, are in the interest of some powerful groups who would be less influential, more threatened by majority rule. What is made more difficult by the politics of stalemate is the capture of state power to advance the social interests of the many. In other words, in a gridlocked Congress, power doesn't come from an electoral majority or the interest of the majority of citizens. Power comes from the control of a small number of seats. Control that great sums of money purchase for maximum effect and can easily outweigh what little power a majority of Americans can have through voting.
Let me just make this clear. Vice President Harris has been and will be a strong supporter of Israel as a secure, democratic, and Jewish state, and she will always ensure that Israel can defend itself, period. That's who Kamala Harris is. Let me just make this clear.
That's her husband.
Vice President Harris has been...
According to Wolin, achieving this state of gridlock is crucial to the interest of a party like the Democrats. While the Republicans can be unabashedly pro-business, as the party meant to represent the left, the Democrats have to play a different game. While claiming to represent...
it's almost like I'm always right, huh?
The interest of the majority, quote, the poor, minorities, the working class, anti-corporatists, pro-environmentalists, and anti-imperialists, they also know that in a two-party system, these people don't have any other powerful representation. There is no viable third party for those who reject putting corporate profits first. And that means the Democrats can simultaneously use the rhetoric of progress while remaining competitive by catering to the interest of corporations who fund them just as much as their opposition. Democrats always need to remain a pro-business party if they want to stay in power. They also need to be seen by enough of the voting population as the only home for progressive politics. To square that circle, the Democrats need to have politicians who allow them to profess their supposed progressiveness without actually needing to deliver on it. As a result, every election becomes about winning this majority through mobilizing voters with progressive rhetoric. And once the seats have been earned, the extent of political participation for most people is now reduced to being upset about corporate Democrats and the lobbyists behind them, and waiting for the next election. Quote, gridlock establishes the conditions of electoral politics. In elections, the party set out to mobilize the citizen as voter, to define political obligation as fulfilled by the casting of a vote. Afterwards, post-election politics of lobbying, repaying donors, and promoting corporate interests, the real players, takes over. The effect is to demobilize the citizenry, to teach them not to be involved or to ponder matters that are either settled or beyond their efficacy. Wolin calls this state of affairs managed democracy. It's a system in which, rather than being dominated by the tyrannical majority the Founding Fathers whined about, a careful set of controls is put in place to empower a corporate minority and block any form of majority rule that doesn't align with its preferences. So under this system, winning for the Democrats doesn't mean getting enough seats to do whatever they want. They win the game of politics when they can get just enough seats to do the bare minimum and keep voters coming back without seriously upsetting the corporate backers whose influence is much...
I mean, obviously, it makes sense that things are so... do you think this country is naturally narrowly divided? Like, come on.
...more important, and who they actually need to care about. Now, weakening popular majorities was always built into the structure of American government, with its electoral college, bicameral legislature, and unequal term lengths between the more popular House and the more aristocratic Senate. But the rotating villain strategy specifically lets the Democrats sit back and retain enough legitimacy by letting just a few of their colleagues take the heat for voting against policies they don't want to see happen. And to make this strategy work, Democratic leadership is highly involved in the process of sidelining progressives and keeping their numbers to a minimum, while throwing their support behind centrists they'll get to scold down the line. For example, it was recently revealed in the American Prospect that 4 former directors of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the official campaign arm of the Democrats in the House, have been working against progressive incumbents to get conservative, centrist Democrats elected instead. This is the same organization that, 4 years ago, while many of these directors worked there, had an official policy against using party resources to attack incumbents. But the difference was that in 2020, the incumbents were the centrists, and now they're the progressives. So attacking them is totally fine. But those are former directors. The fact that they aren't really official Democrats anymore might be enough to dismiss them for some people. Much harder to dismiss, though, are the current Democratic leaders in the House throwing all their weight behind centrists that regularly vote against the party. Back in March, Sludge revealed that, quote, the House Democratic Leadership Super PAC donated more than $1.1 million to a lobbyist-run centrist group that has worked to undermine the Biden administration's agenda on lowering drug prices, regulating the finance industry, and put hundreds of thousands of dollars behind obstructionists.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is who Hakeem Jeffries is. I've been talking about Hakeem for years. I mean, I was talking about Hakeem Jeffries. I called it a Majority Report, I don't know, 6 fucking years ago, and I said you could really watch out for Hakeem Jeffries. He's one of the most anti-left politicians in the House, and he's coming for us, and he's probably going to be the next leader, and we need to stop him by any means necessary. And then when he got picked, there was basically no one even cared.
The party wanted to actually do stuff when in power, its leaders wouldn't throw so much money at the corporate darlings it knows will block every bill that would fulfill a campaign promise. Case in point, Hillary Clinton just endorsed George Latimer against the more progressive challenger Jamal Bowman in the primary race in New York. Who's George Latimer? Well, according to Clinton, a, quote, strong principled Democrat who will fight for President Biden's agenda. According to Latimer's own track record, though, he's a centrist who refuses to raise taxes on the wealthy and will stand behind Israel no matter what. That race, by the way, has become the most expensive House primary ever, in large part because United Democracy Project, an AIPAC-affiliated super PAC, pumped in more than $14 million in ads for the centrist candidate. And it's not the first time we've seen Democratic leadership do this. 3 years ago, once again in New York, the chairman of the state's Democratic Party, Jay Jacobs, ran the same smear campaign against a progressive to defend the party's centrist option, one of the highest-ranking bipartisan House members, Carolyn Maloney. But don't misunderstand me here. At the end of the day, what the rotating villain trope shows isn't that there are good and bad Democrats. That's not the point. Just about any Democrat can take on the role of an obstructionist. It's nothing exceptional, and many do. Sinema used to be a radical progressive running with the Green Party. That never stopped her from becoming a huge obstacle to progressive policies. The point is that for every somewhat left-wing Democrat opening up space for working-class politics, there is a party apparatus, a governmental structure, and a corporate stranglehold on politics ready to unravel their efforts.
Yep, he's dead fucking right. And I've said this for a long time, that the main impediment to progress in this country is not the Republican Party, it's the centrist Democrats. Jeffries of New York. Now, chat, if you have been watching this stream, you know and you've known for a long time that Hakeem Jeffries is quietly the biggest threat to the progressive movement. He is the most anti-progressive member, and he's being groomed by Nancy Pelosi to be the next Speaker of the House. Wow. That was me 4 years ago. Or I'm sorry, that was August 5th, 2021. So 3 years ago. I hit it completely, the nail completely on the head. Of course I did. Of course I was right. And what does it matter? What does it matter? How many times do I have to perfectly predict what was going to happen or make analysis that's dead on balls accurate? Do you think people give a shit?
For every progressive campaign promise, you can always keep in your head a little asterisk that says, if we feel like it won't hurt our finances too much. And while a few Democrats take the heat for being the flipped vote, the party and dozens of regular rank-and-file elected officials get all the benefits of opposing progressive politics without actually having to admit it. The truth is that the Democrats will never be a force for radical change in this country. Radical change comes from the organized masses, and that is not who the Democrats represent. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that this channel is entirely grassroots funded. Since sponsors don't want to touch videos like these, we have to rely on the generous support of viewers like you.
What a banger,
if you'd like to help
chat.
keep this channel afloat and get...
What a banger. Absolute banger. Make sure you run in here and hit that like button for second thought. I wish you had a bigger show or a podcast that reached more than just us. Your intelligent, really honest approach is lacking in political discussions. Yeah. Well, I mean, you need to demand that I go on shit. It's really up to you guys. I mean, you know.
Get some great perks while you're at it. Active members.
Anyway, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, join their Discord, join the podcast, do it all.
She has no idea who Mike is.
Mike. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. But your name, wanna start changing your ways. Change new ways. We're changing your name.